Despite Terraria's 1.4.4 update introducing some incredible brand new features and weapon balancing to the game, there was one area that seemed to be leaving some players unsettled. As many of you know, the update completely overhauled a number of melee weapons throughout the progression, mostly making them more viable from longer ranges. Included in this selection was the iconic Terra Blade, which has stirred some slight controversy over whether or not it was buffed or actually just straight up nerfed. Today, we're going to be taking a look at the Terra Blade's performance now compared to its pre-1.4.4 counterpart, and figure out if this legendary weapon has really been done dirty or been blessed. Let's jump into it. First things first, it's worth noting that the Terra Blade's crafting recipes remain the same, requiring a True Knight's Edge, True Excalibur, and a Broken Hero Sword dropped from Mothrons. However, the majority of its earlier crafting materials have received a significant buff in the update, technically making the process of obtaining the weapon slightly easier. On the surface, the new Terra Blade's functionality has been completely overhauled, now having an area of damaging energy around the blade, which deals damage in a wide AoE. You'll also notice a completely different projectile. Instead of firing sword beams, you'll now fire large, rapidly moving slashes of green energy that cover a lot more of the screen. This mostly appears as a pleasant buff. However, like most things, something else had to be compensated for in order to have these massive projectiles. The base damage was reduced from 115 to 85, and its use time was increased from 14 to 18. On first impressions, this does sound brutal, and was very noticeable during the single target DPS test, with the new version not quite keeping up with the old Terra Blade, even when using the blade and projectile. Luckily, the multiple target test actually sees the new version deal slightly more DPS as it can pierce 14 targets instead of 2. Unfortunately though, it's overtaken again by the old Terra Blade when getting close and personal using the blade, suggesting that group projectile damage might be the only area the new blade excels in. But there is one more trick up its sleeve. You see, due to its increased damaging area, you are now able to strike enemies behind the player, which is incredibly handy from a survivability point of view. Okay, so with the DPS looked at, let's see how they perform in some more realistic scenarios. Against a line of enemies, the new Terra Blade is undoubtedly able to travel further, inflicting damage onto more enemies, whereas the old version seemed to deal higher damage onto less. This is further reinforced when fighting higher HP targets like biome mimics. You see, although the old Terra Blade is able to dish out more damage, it's unable to deal any damage at all to the mimics in the back, whereas the new version deals a wider spread of damage to all of them. Next, I took a look at bosses, starting with Golem. Now, the actual time taken to defeat Golem should be taken with a pinch of salt, as the whole fight has also been reworked, making this data uncomparable. But just looking at it from an ease of use perspective, the old Terra Blade felt very clumsy to aim in comparison. I'm sure that this could still potentially deal more damage due to its higher DPS, however, this seemed a lot less consistent than the impossible to miss massive green arc of the new version. Moving on to a different boss experience, we have the Cultist. Both felt extremely capable of taking it out, but the only thing I would say is similar to Golem, I felt less vulnerable to damage with the new Terra Blade due to its increased range. This also meant that I didn't have to be so precise with my aiming, meaning I could focus more on dodging. So for this fight in particular, I feel indifferent, as the change in functionality didn't have any noticeable impact on the outcome of the fight. But do you want to know something that did? The pillars. This is truly where the new Terra Blade's large projectile shines and genuinely made the piers the least painful experience compared to any other pre-Moonlord weapon. It's just so easy to use and still deals enough damage to kill any of the tanky solar enemies before they get too close. Previously, with the smaller sword projectiles, things could easily slip past you and end your life, but with this it feels like you have a massive force field around the player, stopping anything in its tracks. So, while the new Terra Blade has still statistically been nerfed on paper, its organic performance has improved drastically, being able to deal damage to a lot more enemies with a lot less effort. In a way, it's a simplified version, as 99% of players wouldn't have been able to hit every single shot perfectly using the old version. Of course, this is only my experience with the weapon, so I'd love to hear your own thoughts on this rework down below.